I'm Grant, and welcome to the Stay At channel for July 24th. So, a little bit of an update for the channel. So, the podcast did not come out last week. I'm still somewhat behind because I went out of town 2 weeks ago. Because with the podcast, it's actually very difficult to schedule because I need to have it recorded several days before it comes out so I can edit it. But then also, it's super dependent on everyone else's schedules, and I just couldn't fit it in. But it should be back on track this Friday because I'm actually going to be recording it a little bit later today, and I have an idea for a small little themed one. But since I didn't have to put out a podcast last week, I did a couple different side projects. One is the podcast should now have some updated graphics. I still have a little more to go, but I believe they should have new thumbnails, at least the style, not the actual picture in them. It should have lower thirds so I can put up like text, like names, like Twitter tags, just links that I want to say like, oh, you can find this here. As well as I guess you could call it just like a background so that I can show multiple video feeds. It's something that's super simple to make in theory, but when you're actually sitting down and creating that in Photoshop, or I use GIMP, it's not that easy to come up with an idea and make it look good, but when it's done, it looks like it's the easiest thing ever. So I'm just glad to have that done. It's a nice little quality step in the podcast for me to add some stuff, make it look good, and just give it a kind of a nice little consistent color scheme. Also, on that same note, is I put out a channel trailer. This is something that I've been meaning to do for a long time because I know that when I go to a channel, usually you'll go to a channel, you'll see a video, you'll like it, and you'll go to their channel homepage. And generally, what you want to see there is a channel trailer. It's something that I think is very easy to forget, and a lot of new YouTubers don't put the time they need to. So it's very important to just give it like a gist. It's essentially a commercial for your channel. And I've been meaning to make one for a long time, but the issue is not any kind of technical side, but just the fact that I never really got to the point where I could say what my channel is about. And that's essentially what the channel trailer is. So it's not quite the official one I'm going to leave up forever, but I think I'm going to change it in a couple weeks. But I'm happy with it right now. Essentially, you can go check it out, I believe, on my uploads. If you're a subscriber, you won't see it on the channel homepage just because you're subscribed already. But I go through saying, like, here's the 3 shows I cover, here's why I went out and started the channel, here's what I hope to do, and how to get a hold of me. Simple stuff like that. So I wanted to finally get that out, and I'm glad I had the time to since I didn't have the podcast. Also, I finally found a technology I'm going to use to help create the website I want to eventually use to push the podcast out. It's a software, or rather, it's a content management system, as it's called in PHP, called Drupal. And essentially what this does is, in the old days of the internet, the way you would create a website is you'd write HTML and then later CSS, and every single web page was a file on a server somewhere. So when you went to go see that web page, you got that file. I want the home page. Like, well, here's the home page's file, and it would generate for you. Well, nowadays, that's a lot of redundant code, and that's something that's really bad. You never want to have redundant code in your code because you could just use it over again. So instead, what you have is a content management system. And this was actually what I was looking for, and I couldn't get a good answer. But I finally, I think, hit the perfect opportunity with this one because it's more than WordPress, less than writing it myself. But essentially what this does is I will go in and using a bunch of templates and custom coding and small little things, I create, like I said, templates. And so instead of having custom pages with their own files, I'll instead say I want to have a podcast page. And this is what makes up a podcast page. It's a video link. It's the audio files, it's all the links, maybe a couple links to other pages, and that's it. But that's all stored in a database, and it generates it all on the fly. So what that lets me do, though, is since it's nice and modular, I can build it up from the ground up without having to do every single thing at once. And that's what I liked about it, is I'm hoping to, I think it's going to take several weeks to do this, but I'd like to eventually get the podcast stuff working first, because that's the most important, even though the site's bigger than that. I want to get that working, and then I have to actually get the database working, internally, a whole separate database. Then I gotta push the database to the internet. Does my local site still work? Push the site to the internet. Does that both still work? Then I can add other stuff. And it's gonna be a very long development process, I think, because I can only really work on it when I don't have basically chores or YouTube or work or anything else that I work on the site. But that's something I'm gonna probably be talking about in the future of these videos, just because I want the update on that. And it's something I'm actually really excited for. I've never really done much web development, and I'm excited that this is going to give me an opportunity to, and this will give me a place to show off well, I guess what I can do and the stuff I've created. Because side little story here is a couple weeks back, about when I think podcast number 2 came out, I had the opportunity through my work to audition for an internal thing where basically I believe they wanted to take a bunch of their text, like internal memos and news, and create videos of them so they could stream it together, and then they just push out the video and you can listen to it. And they just reached out to, is there any employees that want to audition and I guess show us what you got, like to voluntarily participate in this thing. And that went fine, put it out, but I noticed when you actually go in to submit your audition tape, they also have like a little section like, oh, well, do you have any other relevant works? And then here I'm thinking like, well, I do have a whole YouTube channel that's just me talking into a camera and having to like memorize lines and read them back, or just doing it off the cuff and trying to seem natural. But at the same time, I actually, in a much more real sense, looked at it and like, I have all this, but I don't actually have things that I would say, like, this is my portfolio. Here's a selection of my work. Like, at the time, the podcast was a good option, but it was only on the second one. So we hadn't yet hit our stride, and there was still a bunch of, like, audio and technical issues that I hadn't gotten to yet. So I was like, I really need to create something that has a portfolio, like a portfolio, something I can say, here's my work. You know, here's what I've done, here's all the highlights, here's all the stuff I can do, here's all the stuff I want to do. And that's kind of what kindled this interest in the website. As well as the fact that in order to actually submit the podcast, the audio stuff to iTunes and like Google Play, you need to have an RSS feed from a website. So it's a very important step that needs to take place. And it's going to take a while, but it's going to be, I think, a very significant step in the right direction of this channel. So I haven't yet decided how much time I want to allot to it each week, because on one hand, it's going to be a very important part, but on the other hand, I still want to do like my normal stuff. Like I'm still going to do these state of the channel videos. I'm still going to put out the podcast every Friday. That's still kind of a priority because there's still a couple things we need to tweak and all that. So I would still like, I really want to get to that Resident Evil Let's Play stuff. I want to get that up. I just haven't had the time to edit it like I have like the podcast. So it's just going to be kind of a balancing act, but I want to keep you guys updated just because it's, I think, a very significant step for the channel if I can get that up and running. Just the fact that I can say, oh, I run a podcast, and it's not some random YouTube channel out there somewhere. It's, oh, go find me on iTunes. That's a very significant step. Like, that's something I think the average person can understand. That's something I can describe. Because it actually is a problem for me is people ask me, like, well, what do you do outside work? It's like, well, usually I'll just say I work on, like, personal projects. And then if they want me to, like, dive into it, like, oh, well, I run a YouTube channel or a podcast. And that makes a little bit more sense because, but it's, if I don't, it's a little hard to say. Like, I don't want to say, well, I edited 4 people having a conversation in Lightworks for 5 hours. That was my night. Like, that's not a good conversation starter just out of the blue. Because I think most people are looking like, oh, I went out to eat or something. But, sorry, it's a little bit rambling, but I wanted to get out there. There's a lot of things that happened this week because I had so much time for the podcast. And I'm very excited, but I also, it needs so much time to get it all working. But I'll keep you guys updated. As always, you can reach me over on Twitter. It's @taken4GrantD, and I'll see you guys next week.